I'm Miwa Messer. I'm the producer and host of Poured Over, and we're taping live, and I just want to remind you that we are catching you on video, and this guy too, because really we're all here for Morgan, like straight up. Morgan Talty, the acclaimed author of Night of the Living Res, which if you have not yet read it, I'm going to ask you to go read it because it is amazing. If you have already read it, you know what I'm talking about. Fire Exit is the new novel. And we have a ton of ground to cover. But more importantly, I really like this guy. And I'm so excited to ask a bunch of nosy questions. The last time I saw you, I think was like 3 years ago?
Yeah.
So Morgan was...
I've had kids, so I don't know what year it is.
No, you definitely had a kid. So Morgan was a finalist for the Discover Prize, which we brought back in... I should know this, 2021, right? Okay, so you were our first class back, and you had some pretty good company.
Yeah, it was 21 to 22.
And you had been on the road for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and you came rolling through New York. We did that big party at Union Square, and you signed a bajillion books for us, and your eyes were the size of dinner plates the whole time, because I think you had not been fully prepared for the response to Night of the Living Res.
No.
I mean, it was huge. It was everywhere. It was a trade paper. We were super stoked about it. We were not the only people who were super stoked about it. And it just, I mean, it reminded me of Dennis Johnson. And I'm a huge fan of Dennis Johnson, but that was sort of the first thing I thought about. I know Louise Erdrich is a huge influence for you, Scott Momaday. Pretty sure Tommy Orange might have slid in there at some point, because, I mean, There came out, and I should know this too.
2018.
18, okay. So...
He beat me to what I wanted to do.
There can be more than one, Morgan.
No, I know, exactly.
There can be more than one, I promise you. I want to go back to one small thing, though, because apparently you were writing Fire Exit at the same time you were writing the stories in Night of the Living Res.
Yeah. So
Dude, what? Like, how?
I don't know, I just did it.
Fair.
Well, I was in my MFA program.
Okay.
And you choose... Like you choose one project, you know, that you're gonna do, and I was working with Rick Bass, and he's a short story writer. He's a novelist too, but I mean, his short stories are that's his thing. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I'll work on stories with him. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'll just do a story collection, but I also had the novel in case I got assigned somebody else. So I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna work on both, and so. I busted the first draft out of the novel as I was writing stories. I wrote the novel draft faster than the story collection, strangely, because it was very bad. You know, it's very fast and easy to write a novel if you just do third person omniscient and have no goals. You know, but if you have like an idea, you're fine. But.
Okay, so clearly that is not the iteration of Fire Exit that we have now.
No, but it was a necessary one.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Big believer in drafts.
Yeah.
Just barf out the draft, figure it out. It has always seemed to me, though, and you and I spoke when Night of the Living Res came out, too, but it's always struck me that the bulk of your writing happens in the rewriting for everything. Even the stories, even when you were playing with David and all of the different iterations of him, and also the order in which the stories fell in Night of the Living Res, you were constantly sort of just picking and tweaking and picking and tweaking and...
Yeah, I mean, I still do that. Night of the Living Res is published, and I'm like, we shouldn't have put this story in there. Like, I'm like, it has artistically brought it down some, like in an artistic way. And you're probably like, now I want to talk about that. But, yeah, I don't know. I write, in my mind, every page is a mile on the odometer towards this city. I don't know where it is yet. So I can always go back and look at it, right? And I may have missed the exit, you know, or something like that. And the more drafts I write, the more I'm able to know stuff. Like, I don't have to juggle places and, you know, moments and everything. Like, I know it as good as I know. I don't know what happened yesterday, really, but like history. It becomes history in a way. And then when I sit down to write, you know, whatever draft it is, I'm like, I know this is the one because I know everything, right? Or I don't know everything, but I have enough to guide me that it will surprise me. And that's where I really try to get to. And once I'm there, that's when I get real picky. Okay. Yeah. Once that draft's done is when I go in and
So with Fire Exit, the cast gets a lot smaller. It's Charles, his former girlfriend Mary, who is the mother of his daughter Elizabeth, his mother, and his pal Bobby, who did remind me a little bit of Fellas.
Yeah, he's the Fellas.
He's a little bit of a fella. Although, the kid who sets the community garden on fire, I'm pretty sure that was Fellas, right?
Yeah, there's an Easter egg or two in Living Red. I mean, in Fire Exit.
It's totally worth it. Part of me is trying not to immediately jump to Blood Quantum because it is what drives this novel, but it is a sticky wicket. So I want to start with Charles. Okay? He is in his 50s. He has been raised on the Penobscot Reservation. He is not, in fact, however, native.
No. As far as I know, he's not.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Where did he come from?
He was just part of the idea of the book that I kind of thought of in 2015.
Okay.
Which is the same year I wrote the title story, Night of the Living Res. But it was at Dartmouth College when I was taking federal Indian law class and a law and lit class. Shout out the Nads back there. And the one class, law and lit, we read legal documents as literature, and we read literature in a way that a lawyer should read it to become a better person, right? So.
Well, I mean, practicing law, right? Making arguments in court, it is all a form of storytelling. I mean,
exactly. It's
hopefully
narrative,
it's truthful. I mean, in theory, you're supposed to tell the truth.
Yeah, you look at any federal, Indian court case, though, starting from 1823, and they're,
there's some
fabricated, and, but we read The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich, and if you haven't read it, it's a great book. And that speaks directly. The inciting incident of the whole book is because of a court case. That's why the story exists, and that's why it's prolonged for so long. So I just took that and I was like, well, what can I look at, right, in this legal narrative that has shaped Indian country and create an inexplicable situation out of, something that is this void, this hole that nobody's really talked about, like a situation that could arise. And I was like, and I thought about Blood Quantum because I just did. It just came to me, and I was like, what if we had somebody who had a quarter Penobscot blood, which is the minimum, have a child with a non-native, and she lies because she wants the child to be an enrolled member and says the child belongs to somebody else. And I was like, all right, that's good. Yeah, that's good. And I flicked my cigarette, and those two are picturing me in front of the English department. That's probably where I was. Flicked it, and I didn't think about it again until I wrote the draft in 2018. Okay. Yeah. But that was Charles. He was the non-native.
Right.
I didn't find him until I started writing. And his first name, it actually wasn't Charles. It was originally called Dusk.
I'm glad you made that change.
Yeah. So don't do ideas, do things. You need objects and stuff, but Dusk, no.
Charles, though, has a rough go of things because one of the things you're talking about with him is he lives on the edge of poverty and has always sort of lived on the edge of poverty, right? We don't really know what he does. He sort of works outside when he can, kind of thing, but essentially he would be unhoused had his stepfather, Frederick, not built this house for him on the other side of the reservation. He's kicked off the reservation at age 18 because he does not have any native blood.
He has no ties legally. Louise could stay because she was married.
His mom.
Yeah, Charles's mom could stay because she was married, right. But she ended up, selling the house. I mean, it's not, right. But he wouldn't be, if he hadn't had Frederick, it would have been, or if there'd been no money,
right.
Yeah, he would have had nothing.
But he was raised native. I mean, he and his stepfather are essentially father and son. I mean,
when I read it, that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I just do. I mean, I grew up with kids on the res whose parents had married in, and while they may not have been 4 or 2, I think he was 2-ish or 3-ish right. when he moved there. I think something. I swear to God, I wrote this book. But I grew up with friends that I went to school with and got better grades than who are not native, got better grades than I did in native studies, right? And in like Penobscot language class, from which I only learned a bin, which is to sit down, and justaux, which is to shut up, right? Like that's how we were. But they learned everything. They learned our stories, right? And I say they as if they're this other thing,
right?
And like I'm even doing it myself. And then they leave when they're 18, and it's like I wonder what they think. I wonder how they feel. Like I really do. Like I'm like, do they feel a sense of indigeneity? Like having, especially where we are located, because it's an island.
Right.
Like we're cut off from everybody. Like they would be with us when we would go and cross the bridge to fight the white kids over on the other side. I'm not joking. That's what we would do. Like you cross. I think there's this. I don't know if Night of Living. I don't know. You shoot them with BB guns and stuff. But like, yeah, when they would try to come over across the ice in the winter, and they were with us. You know, they were the ones like. They were we were part of each other, you know,
right.
Even though they weren't native. We never.
It's a community.
Yeah,
you're talking about community.
But then there are some natives who are like, what's that? Well, white kid doing it. You know what I mean? Like, there's that. But for me and my friends, for the most part, it was like, you don't do this stuff, you know.
I'm going to tread gently because I'm obviously not native, but. Blood quantum is a phrase that I can't really get comfortable with, and it is the measurement by which communities are defined.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to explain it, because halfy me is still going, ooh, okay.
I feel weird that I know there's a lawyer back there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, please. So for federally recognized tribes, they have to, or tribes have been keeping track of membership for a long time, even before it was required. They have their own ways. They have their own processes and ways, but like prior to colonization, I don't think they really thought about it as like, well, there were different systems. I won't go into all that, but I'll think about when the colonists arrived. And we get into the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, and you know the Indian Relocation Act, and we start moving into like all these different policies, and tribes have to keep track of citizenship, but it's up to the tribe how they want to do it. Like really, the tribes, as far as I know, the supreme, like nobody. The federal government can't come in and be like, this is how you have to define membership.
Right.
There's a court case, Santa Clara Pueblo versus Martinez, 1978, right? Yeah. That it was they didn't do blood quantum. They did patrilineal descent, and so there was a woman who had children with a man who wasn't Santa Clara Pueblo, and she wanted her children to be Santa Clara Pueblo, and so she sued the tribe, and it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court basically said, no, we don't have the authority to come in and tell you, like, this is an internal tribe, like you have, this is your thing, right? But then they can tell us, like, we can't try non-natives on, you know what I mean, on our own land and stuff, but beyond, so there's like that, and so people have it set up that way, or they use blood quantum, which popped up in the 1700s, and was two sides of the same coin. It was one for slaveholders to make sure that property was like in place, you know, and then it was also for natives to basically be like, oh, okay, well, we'll dilute their blood, but they're still here, and we can still, you know, we don't have to kill them, right? We can just like measure it until they're dead, and then but they're still here, and oh, you're white now. Right. What? But tribes have like I don't know. I feel like you'd be like, if you can juggle 3 balls, you're part of the tribe. Like you could do that probably, like and it would pass. But that's how most tribes do it. Is blood quantum? Is they just set it at a certain number, and they've had to, and the federal government asks that they do it, or else. Didn't really exist, right? So
it's just such a weird place. I'm going to quote you quoting a historian actually in a piece you wrote for Esquire. Its use started in 1705 when Virginia adopted laws which made both a person of American race and a person of half American race, a, quote, half-blood, in other words, a legally inferior person. And it's just wild that this is the measurement.
Yeah.
I'm still actually having a moment, because also your son, you write in the same piece that your son, Charlie, when he hits 18, he is going to have to leave the reservation.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you're going to raise him in that house until he's 18. So I'm kind of looking at this
we actually
going,
don't live on the res no more. So,
okay.
So,
all right.
my
So you're
my
okay.
wife will probably have him there. We joke he's gonna be like a Will Ferrell character, like he's just gonna live at home, like, you know, forever. He's always like a grown up, you know, and talking about, but yeah, but no, we're not in that situation.
Okay.
But
all right, that's good.
But the stuff I write about is still applicable, right? Like he's only eligible for Indian Health Services until he reaches the age of 18, and then after that, what do? You know, obviously we would be there to help, but some indigenous descendants can't do that, right? So they get on main care, you know,
Right.
it becomes harder for them. They just get trapped in a system that I could say a lot of bad things about
yeah,
it. But
I know
it's
you
just,
can. I
there's
feel
so
like we
many.
have to bring it up, and at the
Yeah.
same time, I'm just, as a human being, I'm looking at this going, really? It's 2024. This is a wild measurement to be using. And I mean, I was born in Boston. We have our own stuff. You know Massachusetts. Hi, King Philip's War. We have some stuff to answer for. Sorry about Thanksgiving. So sorry. Not my idea. Super not my idea. I once played a pilgrim in the 4th grade Thanksgiving play because, I mean, I was the only brown kid in my school. Sarah Alden, right here, reporting for duty.
They did a good job, though.
I didn't have to say anything. I just had to stand at the back because I was tall.
Oh, okay.
I was tall for my age. They just said stand there. I said, okay.
All right.
We didn't really have a choice. One of the things that drives Fire Exit is this idea that Charlie believes that story is the thing that makes us who we are. Like, ultimately, our stories are who we are, right? Like, that is the thing that defines us. And if you read, obviously, you know, you get to experience someone else's life through a writer's eyes or through the character's eyes, however you want to see it. But Charlie's approach, and I'm trying not to give anything away, so if I sound like I'm dancing around a story point, I am.
I found it's really hard to talk about the book.
Yeah. So we are, Charlie's belief in story, right? And years ago, the performance artist Holly Hughes was saying, oh, you know, telling stories is the first human thing we ever did, right? Like, if you think about pictographs, like, really, telling stories is the first human thing we ever did. And Charlie has some ideas which are very well intentioned, but I think he's really caught up in his own point of view. And I think he has a really hard time figuring out how other people might fit into that point of view. And I feel for the guy. I wish his life had been a little easier for him.
Me too.
I wish he had made some different decisions. But I don't disagree with him that we are our stories, right? Like, if someone comes up to you and says, okay, Morgan, tell me, what's the first thing you would tell me if you and I were meeting for the first time? Like, what's the thing I need to know about you? What's the story you tell about Morgan?
I went up to my mom when I was 3 or 4, and I went up to her, and I was like, Mama, I got to tell you something. She's like, what, honey? And I was like, Mickey brought me behind the pool. And she was like, what, honey? She's like, Mickey. I was like, Mickey brought me behind the pool. And she was waiting for something really bad. But we broke eggs. This is a grown man. He stole eggs from a refrigerator. You know what I mean? So, like, that's what I would say. Because, like, I'm a weirdo and, like, a jerk. And like, I like irreverency, you know? And
Yeah, you also like to scare your mom.
And I like to scare my mom. Well, I didn't mean to. I was scared of my mom because I thought I was going to get in trouble for the eggs.
Right.
But she thought it was because of something else. And like, I look at that and I'm like, my kid said that. I'd also be like, what did Mickey do? You know, like, but that would be the story I'd tell. I don't know. I don't know. There'd be random ones. That's what I do is like, and that's what kind of like how this book is structured is it's a story, and then we get into a story, and we get into a story, and then we come out of it, right? And
you could argue that it's a little more linear than Night of Living Res, but I wouldn't argue it's straightforward kind of story. I mean, we have to dip back into Charles and Louise and Frederick's life before we get to the present moment. And also, how is Bobby not dead? Dude, how is that guy still alive? Okay, when you meet Bobby, you will understand why I just said that. But he's one of those guys where you're just like, how are you still alive?
We all know a Bobby.
Yeah. We can smell the beer coming out of his pores from here. How is he still alive?
I don't know. He's one of those people who are like, he could do anything with his life probably because he has such great luck, I think, except with marriages, which you'll see maybe. Like, not even with that. Like, that's not even the thing. It's just he's an addict, right? He's addicted and he's suffering from, an illness, right, of alcoholism. And it just put him in a place where he can't go either way. He's decided that he's like, I'm just going to drink. I liked that about him because
he does have a clarity of purpose that some don't have, but
yeah. Plus, you just don't ever really just see the fact. Like society, I feels like, no, you either need to be like spend the rest of your life going in and out of rehab, or you have to like be clean, like or But the truth is some people are forever going to just use until, and I'm not being like a pessimist here. It's just I see it all the time. I'm like, they just if they use and they make it until their 40s, 50s, 60s, and then sometimes they occasionally get out of it, and then they live until they're like 120, and you're like, how did you do that? He's going to be that person. And I was like, I thought about it, and I was like, no, he's going to be an alcoholic, and he's just going to be an alcoholic.
He does try to show up, though, as a friend for Charles. He does try to show up for Charles's mother, Louise.
Oh, he loves Louise.
Yeah. When I think about this sort of triangle, right, there's Frederick, who's Charles's stepfather, Charles, and Bobby. These three, let's take these three guys, right? And if you look at the portrait of masculinity that you've sort of created for them, right? Because Frederick, he's out there, he's hunting for his own food, he's living off the land, he's building houses for his son, like he is just doing the stuff in a very Frederick way. And he is Charles's only model, and yet there's a disconnect between the two of them.
Between Frederick and
Charles. I think Frederick has an authenticity that Charles doesn't know how to access in himself.
I think it's because of the fact that he recognizes he's not, like, he comes up against that contradiction of coming back to blood quantum, right? That there's a wall, blood quantum has created a wall that has made it impossible for. So Charles is that example of somebody who, like, that's why he can't connect as, like, he sees Frederick as his father. Right. He does, but not 100%. Here we come back to percentages, right? Because he knows, like, either subconsciously or consciously that I'm not native because I don't have blood. It becomes a thing, right? Like, it becomes a what would be the right word? Demarcation or something, right? And it's, somebody asked this question, not this question, but brought something up the other night about, like, asked me, how do I tell people I'm native? Like, and it was an interesting question.
That's a slightly loaded question, but okay.
Yeah, but it was super interesting to answer because, like, we can look at someone and tell if they're an other, right? Or you can look at somebody and be like, they're white.
Hi.
Yeah, right? Like me, you'd be like, oh, this is a white dude right there. You know what I mean? And like, Night of the Living Res, for example, remember D, he's like asked the janitor something, and the janitor says, what's the caterpillar situation like up on the res? Right. And he's like, how'd you know I'm native? And he's like, you're wearing your shirt. And he said Penobscot, And so it's like, how do people express who they are, right? And some people's skin express it, right? Features, but also cultural clothing, perhaps even jewelry, but not a lot of native people who don't have dark skin or have long hair or anything, because no one would think I was native even if I had long hair. But like, how do we show ourselves as indigenous? You know what I mean? Right. Like, it's a weird thing, and it's like, here's my tribal ID card, like it has my percentage on it. Like someone asked that question and I was like, I told them, I was like, I appreciate your question. It was a great question, but I was like, I've never been like, I'm Morgan Penobscot, I've never had to say that. And when I have said I'm Native, most people are like, well, you must get a lot of money because you guys have casinos and stuff, right? And it's like, people are stupid. Like, they just are. They really are. I went to an Ivy League school, and in a Native Lit class, the teacher asked why we were taking the class, and one person says, well, I thought I'd take this class because I really like arrowheads. And I was like, okay.
That's actually not the first time I've heard that story, and it still makes me mad. No, it still makes me mad. Dude, you could keep telling that story, and it will always make me mad. I just like the freedom.
Yeah, but that's the thing with Charles, is like there's just so, blood quantum is actually just like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this is some like serious, sophisticated form of genocide. Like, it was an advanced form. Like, I don't think even white people knew what they were doing when they made it. Like when they were like, let's do this number thing. Like, it adapts, it changes, it's like alien technology almost, in a way. Because it is so, I don't know, is it the blood quantum or is it the eligibility requirements? Like what is it actually, though, that's creating the problem? I'm looking at Emily because, like, I don't know.
Hello, we need a lawyer in the house. I just still am having a hard time wrapping my brain around just the phrase blood quantum. It feels weird in the mouth when you say it. It's just, there are vestiges of other stuff happening in that phrase where I'm just like,
blood quantum, yeah.
What is happening here?
It's not good. No, I mean, I remember when I was little, I wrote about this in the Georgia Review. But when we were little, we used to, I remember two friends were fighting, about who was more Indian than the other based off of that number. And they beat each other up over it. And, I started the piece by using we, and by the very end, it's like I move into the I. And that's really what it did, is it did what it needed to do. It needed to isolate people's sense of connection and self and identity. But like I said, it's this technology that can become anything and adapt to any situation. And growing up, I don't know how many other Native folks out here have experienced it with blood quantum and or skin color or like anything, or even like not having grown up on the res, for example, is like another thing. Like if you're like hadn't grown up on the res, you're like, people are kind of like, who that were you, But so place also has become a colonized sense of percentage, and it's like, well, I grew up on the res for like 10 years of my life, and you're like, okay, well, you can kind of come in. So it's weird how numbers, I don't know, it's just my thinking and what I've heard and seen, and it's like, I guess we're actually not made of stories, we're made of numbers, is what.
I mean, obviously it's your community, and it should be defined however the community sees fit, but it feels limiting in a way that story hopefully is not. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I mean, story's infinite. Story doesn't end in, but blood quantum, I mean, most tribes don't mess with blood quantum unless the blood has become so diluted, they're afraid that they'll go extinct. I don't know a better word, extinct, which is interesting because they don't really go extinct because they're still living, right? One day you're just like, oh yeah, we're no longer Native because that last person had a kid with, like we're the last two Indians on Earth. What do we do? And then they're like, do we repopulate? I don't know, but like that's the only time you'll see a lift where what they'll do is they'll say, okay, everybody who was a quarter is now 50%, and then every
wait, you just changed the number because.
Yeah.
You need to. Okay.
Because it gets too low. Like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Because I think of community as, shared language, shared tradition, shared culture, shared... I do believe in emotional truth actually being more of the thing. Not in the Rachel Dolezal way. Like, can we just be clear? Like, not that. But that a community defines itself.
Yeah.
But that it's the human piece of it. It's the story and the food and the culture and and sometimes the culture is great and sometimes you're like, oof, we need to evolve. But
that's the bad part about it is like the community defines itself, but that very community has been internally colonized by these policies, right? That have been implicated over the course of, 100 and 200 years. So it's like, yes, we remain connected to tradition. Yes, we are revitalizing language. Yes, we're doing all of this stuff. But at the same time, we have to contend with the fact that our minds are colonized. All of our minds are colonized. None of y'all are excused from it. I'm going to say it right now. No one is excused from it. We all have been, I don't know whose fault it is. You can't point to any, it's interesting to think about what. Yes, this is a collection of history over years and the power of white men and patriarchy and stuff, but it's like, it just sucks because Indian country, I think, is a really, to look at Indian country and to see the mess that it is, it's like, I feel like that's the way out in a way, is by bolstering sovereignty, for example.
Define Indian country for a second, because you're talking more than just reservations, right? You're talking...
When I say Indian country, I guess in my mind I'm thinking of federally recognized tribes that are spread out. But then there are tons that are only state recognized, and then there are tons that are not recognized, and then there are tons who I don't know, pop up and they're like, we're native, and everyone's like, who are you? And it is just a bunch of white people sometimes that are just pretend, you know what I mean? That are it happens, right?
Okay.
But I'm not going to sit here and be like, no, point to anybody. I don't know. But Native people everywhere. You just, we're invisible though. But I feel, when I say Indian country, that's what I'm talking about, is federally recognized tribes. And I feel like it starts there.
So we get a guy like Charles who doesn't have the strongest formal education, is an outsider in his own community. Because even when he goes back, there's some stuff. We get enough of his backstory. We get other sort of flashes of his history. The loneliness that poor man experiences. He and David David from Night of the Living Res, they sit on a similar continuum. I just feel like Charles and David are much more sibling-esque than some other people might think.
I'm thinking just because the writer in me isn't deliberately doing this stuff. But yeah, I can see that connection. And I think Charles and David, because they are very passive up until a certain point, right? And I don't know if that's some part of me that is being wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, because this isn't a political book by any means, at all. When you read the Esquire article, you're like, oh, this is about politics and stuff, and you read this, you're just, it's a narrative. It's character driven. It's its plot is driven by the characters acting. It's a novel. It's a separate thing. I don't even think Blood Quantum mentioned in here. Maybe once or twice. That's it. It doesn't even explain it, really.
So I'm coming to this as a total outsider, obviously. And for me, I feel like I've been brought into a world that is familiar because of the earlier book, right?
Okay.
But the way you write about class and the way you write about access to things like medical care and who experiences what and how they experience it, I don't think you can say Fire Exit is not fully a political novel. I think the reality of the world we live in, right? There are going to be moments, where you're very aware, Louise's life could have shaped up very differently if she had not married Frederick.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say, so I'm not saying it's not a political book, but it's not a political book in the way that you might think of, They're There, for example.
Yeah.
They're There has moments where it departs from narrative to kind of or even Wandering Stars, his newest, Tommy Orange's newest novel, right? He brings in the political, he reimagines history and stuff. I have always shied away from it because I've wanted to see what, in my imagination, these characters could do and what they could become, right? And I suppose that's why maybe there's this strange connection between David and Charles, because they, I think, maybe or perhaps my aspiration that one day tribal communities will actually be considered nations, like, I don't know what I believe politically, like, I'm just for like take care of each other, I don't know what category that is anarchist, like take care of everybody, but like
we can refer to you as a humanist. That works.
Yeah, that works. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, but aren't we products of our history? Aren't we products of our communities? I mean, I suppose we're not products of our history if we're not taught our history, but I mean, I feel like I'm in many ways products of multiple histories. There's family history, there's history, there's global history. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am if it weren't for sort of...
Yeah, it's true, but then you also have the potential to be so much more if you knew and had access to other stories.
Right.
And this actually happened to me last night. I gave a reading in Cambridge and in Boston. My aunt on my dad's side lives out there. And I'm working on another book, and it's a memoir. It's about my parents who were both passed away. And in my mind, the book is like I want my children to be able to read it one day and be like, oh, I knew these people, like growing up. Like I just knew them. And my Aunt Anne, or my great Aunt Anne, and my two cousins were with her, and she was telling me a story. And it was about how my dad, I'd never heard the story before, but he apparently, he was at Northwestern studying, and I guess he dropped out, and he was driving UPS, and I don't know, he was doing drugs, and he was at hospital. He ended up getting hospitalized. His dad picked him up with his uncle, and I'd never heard this story before. Like I never heard it. And I guess in the car ride over, one of my cousins, who's much older than me, it was a baby at the time, like really cute baby. I guess my dad, because my dad loved babies. My dad just loved them so much, and he had always wanted a baby. Like I'd always heard that, but I never knew this story. I guess he was all messed up, and he looked at this relative of ours, and he was like, he said like really like sadly, he's like, I'm never gonna get the opportunity to have a baby. And
wait, your dad said that?
My dad said that, yeah. He was like...
While he was figuring out his stuff.
Yeah, he was like, he said, I'm never gonna get to have a baby. Like, he was, like, certain of it. Like, it was never gonna happen. But then I came along and he got me. But, I mean, everything didn't work out, But, like, I know he loved me more than anything in the world. But I realized, I was like... okay, I'm not writing this book just for my son. I'm like, there's so much stuff I don't know about my dad because I didn't ask him, or he didn't say it. And like, it just sucks how we have, as a society, have become, I don't know, it's hard to articulate exactly because like we see it and we just live it, but we don't really name... like we'd say nuclear family, we can use stuff like that, but like we've lost track of, I don't know, something.
I always call it family mythology because
that's a good way to think
when
about it,
you sort of have to gauge how much of the truth you're getting depending on which person is telling you what story when and what time of day sometimes. I mean, it's like you're navigating all of that space and you figure it out. If you're lucky, you figure it out pretty quickly, and sometimes you figure it out later, and at least you figured it out. But I think it's like finding out your parents were people before you showed up on the planet. That's like the most shocking thing in the world when you're an adolescent and you're like, oh, you had a life? What? I don't understand. I'm really happy that you're writing the memoir, to be honest. I cannot wait to read it.
I like it.
I think we have to wait for a minute, though. It's part of a 3-book deal, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think I remember reading something about a 3-book deal, but okay,
Nope.
fine. There's a memoir coming. But I am going to use that to segue into this whole thing that maybe you asked Tommy Orange, and I'm stealing it because I love that guy, and I'm very fond of you. Is there Native American literature? Is there a body of work that, like, are you part of that? Is Tommy part of that?
Yeah, white people have made us part of it. I mean, seriously.
No, I'm talking about from your point of view. I'm not
from
talking
my
about
point of view, if it
when you
exists
get
or not, or like
mis-shelved, which is not us.
Yeah, no. I actually have talked to booksellers too. I'm like, I'm not criticizing you about the way you organize your stuff. I'm talking about something larger. But it's just weird. It's like you go into a bookstore, not this bookstore, and
No, really.
like I imagine everybody has gone to a bookstore and has seen it, things categorized, right? They're like African American literature, and like even like religion too. It's like separated, which is good, I guess. I don't know, or bad. I don't know, but I never thought about it. But like Asian American literature, Latino, Latinx literature, and Native American literature, or they'll all be like tucked together. They're just like, here you go, pick and choose what you want to consume today and eat, and because at least for indigenous people, we have been commodified, right? Like we are commodities. Like that's how I think readers, non-native readers, and I'm not people who aren't native go to the page in the past and expected to get a taste of Indian country and what it meant to be Indian. And was your question, does it exist or does it not? Like it exists.
I'm just wondering where your point of view sits with it. I mean, when I think about there, I also think about a novel that has all of the kinetic energy of like an LA crime novel, even though it's set in Oakland. I think of Night of the Living Rez, and the first thing I thought of when I read it was Dennis Johnson.
Yeah.
And Jesus' Son, which, I mean, you're being native, sure, it's part of it, but I'm also thinking about where the work sits at the sentence level.
One, it's like, we live in a world of categorizations, right? How many of you are English majors or like took English class, perused through an English curriculum at a university, right? There's like 18th century British literature. Yeah, that's white people usually, okay?
I was a history major, so don't look at me, man.
Okay.
I got nothing.
Okay.
I got fairy tales.
Okay.
Sorry.
But like you look at a college curriculum and it's like 20th century literature and 21st century literature, and you take that class and it's a mix of everybody. You get Asian writers, white male writers, women writers, queer, like everything. And then there's like Native American like intro to Native American literature, intro to Asian American literature. There's no intro to white people literature. Like 21st century, like you don't go, like I'm serious.
It's true.
Why? Because it's the default. It's the default against which all other minority literatures are sort of like based on to a degree and in some way that I can't quite articulate, because I don't know if we're talking about craft, if we're talking about academic, like, I don't know at which vantage point we're coming at, but at least in academia, it's like, I had my students this past semester, that was their assignment, their final assignment, is they had to be in groups and they had to riff off of the title, How to Read White People Literature. And so they all built syllabi and compiled lists of like books only by white writers. And
Cheever, Updike.
Yeah.
Which I read. I mean, I read all of that stuff when I was young because it was what was, there. And it's maybe I was reading it as a handbook to understand my pops, but
for me, I don't know. I grew up a storyteller. Like I just did. Like that's what I did. As a kid, I loved hearing stories and I loved telling stories. And it was when I got to college and I'm now a faculty member at the college that denied me admittance as a student. So I went to community college and I fell in love with, I had the time finally, like I was outside of the dysfunction, to look at a book and be like, this is doing just in a different way what I liked to do, which was to tell stories. Every book I read as like, all of my books are marked, marked being like, I don't know if I ever really get to enjoy a story. I enjoy seeing how the story worked more than the actual story in a way, except for the ones that like I can't figure out, right? Those are the Hall of Famers, Alice Munro and Chekhov and like those types. I was never, I don't know it's hard to articulate, but like I read novels and I get so tired of seeing the same formulaic structures. And so this book, I think, I'm just going on a tangent here because this is what I think is important, is we got to not be stagnant, I think, with form and what we expect things to be. And we're like kind of okay with it, right? Like 100 years ago, a novel would start on page 1 and end at page 400, right? You know, or there'd be no breaks. But then you get Anthony Doerr now, because all the light we cannot see in each chapter is like 2 words. No, it's like 5 pages. But like, you know, because our attention spans are maybe, I don't know, but like there's small changes happening. But like there's so many transgressive works out there, and it's like I wonder if we paid attention to them a little bit more, what we could end up with, right? Like this story, the people who don't like it, I think, because it doesn't fit with the way that a traditional novel like it follows that arc type stuff, because I just don't think it's a natural part of storytelling.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I don't think form or structure is an inherent quality of storytelling. We created that. Because like think about it, if nobody existed on this planet, would life could still exist, but if we weren't here, would stories still exist? If we had like an omniscient person looking?
I think they would. I just think we might not recognize. I don't know. This is a game I could play for a really long time, but like I do think story will always.
Yeah.
It's just what does that
it
look like?
predates us. You know, we stumbled into it as a means, you know, to figure stuff out, and we brought to it ideas. It's like, what if we did this, right? And when you ever write something and it's not working, it's because the story's telling you, I don't want it to do that, right? Like that's just me.
So
I'm not
you
high.
as the writer don't
I'm not
actually...
high, all right? I'm sober. I want to make that clear. Like that's how I see it. Is I see it as a separate part. I see it as something that is like I'm an atheist, okay? Like I don't believe in anything, so it's like that is my like only sort of sense of faith I have in that there is this thing that when I'm writing a first draft of, I'm communicating with. And I know that sounds weird, but it's like
no, it doesn't.
It's true though. Like
yeah,
I don't know.
No.
According to my logic, it's true. You know, like yeah.
Okay, outside logic.
New Writer's
it works.
Testament. Yeah.
No, outside logic it works. But I want to go back to something you just said a second ago, which is.
It could be offensive. I mean, that's what we. Yeah. I don't know.
I try to keep the Boston in a box.
Okay.
I really try to keep the Boston in a box.
Nobody can do that. That's impossible. But
have you met me? You have met me. Yeah. What are you talking about? No, the idea that, and I think you've said this before, though, that you as the writer are not in charge of the story itself, that the story determines where it's going. And yeah, you say you've got faith in the story, and it's not like you're, channeling whatever characters. That's not what I'm saying. It's more a matter of you trust the thing to be the thing, is what I'm hearing. And
I let go of the wheel and let the Lord take it, so to speak, like takes the wheel, and like I do, like, because as writers we'll hit dead ends sometimes, right? We're like, oh, I chose the wrong. Out of this action, 5 consequences occurred. I went down the wrong one. But sometimes it's not that you went down the wrong one, it's that you tried to do something the story didn't want you to do, right? Maybe it was, and we see this in feedback from editors and teachers, they're like, missed opportunity for something or other, right? That's the language. That is the key. If you ever see that, that's somebody saying unknowingly, I think, or I would equate being like, oh, that's the story trying to get you to go that way. And if you follow it, and if you just let go of it, and and if you're writing in this way, right, you can't do it with like film and stuff, but like if you're writing for the sake of art, like it's going to guide you to a place that is hopefully good, that is different yet still in line with the time of what's being produced. Not just contributing to, because I look at it as like every time a book comes out, it's like a new star in the sky, and it's like everything's expanding. Chekhov is that star you can still kind of see, right? And Alice Munro is like the North Star now. Like that's how I see it, and it's like they're expanding and they're getting farther apart. But we're doing the exact same thing over history, right? Like the way texts and stories were told 5,000 years ago has changed drastically. And it's like we have to do that if we're going to make progress when it comes to discovering things about the human condition. Because if we just keep doing like Michael Bay film type novels, like, you know, it's like it's, I'm serious, like, where are we gonna go? We're not gonna go anywhere, which is why, like, we need, I'm not saying this book is super transgressive by means, but like, we don't need a nice, neatly boxed book. Like, I want something that's misshapen, that has like something that's nagging. I don't want everything to be tied.
Nagging, I think, is fair. I think calling it misshapen is not accurate. But
what do you mean? I'm just thinking of shapes. That's how I think.
Yeah, no, I
stories
know,
is
and
shapes.
I'm just gonna, yes, but I'm talking to them too.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry.
I'm also talking to the audience. Misshapen isn't the word I would use for this narrative. I love the idea that not everything gets tied up neatly.
Yeah.
I do love the fact that we see people respond in ways that are deeply human and a little surprising. I think if you were a different writer, there might have been slightly more pat things that happened at certain points, and yeah, I am totally dancing around some stuff.
You gotta tell me what you mean after.
Yeah, I will. Mostly our friend Elizabeth.
Oh.
Yeah, right. We can't talk about it here.
No.
All right,
Maybe,
well,
I don't know. I
no,
don't know.
we can't talk
Maybe
about
you see something I don't. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
All right. As you guys can tell, we could keep going for a really long time, but we have some books to get signed. So I'm going to say thank you, Morgan Talty. It is always really good to see you. If you haven't read Night of the Living Res, I'm going to totally nag you again. But Fire Exit is out now.
You gotta buy it because I said so. I will. I'm gonna just end on this very weird, like, I just gotta say it. I've said it on social media before, but like this whole half year leading up to this has been strange. Like, the first reading I was supposed to do was on the anniversary of my mother's passing.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I'm not bragging or whatever, but like the indie pick thing, whatever, the voting ended on my birthday. And today is the anniversary of my father's passing. So it's the day that this book came out. The hotel I checked into, and I have proof via camera and via people, the fire alarm went off and the exit sign was flashing, and I have a video. So it's been like this weird alignment of things going on. And then I heard a voice, and it told me to tell you to buy the book. That's it.
There's some juju in the room.
There is. Thank you, everybody. Thank you
us.
so much. Thank you, Miwa.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.